like I was telling Paula earlier tonight, like I feel like I didn't have access to a lot of academic philosophical content. I never did. And Jordan Peterson kind of forged the path forward to make it accessible because he
Yeah.
got attention with the controversy, the Kathy Newman interview. He already had books and content online. Then suddenly he shows up on the Ben Shapiro show and the Joe Rogan show. And then everyone else who showed up on those two shows right around the time that he did also were divergent thinkers who had something very much worth listening to.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that was it brought it this intellectual dark web, if you call it at the time, kind of brought all of that thinking into a place where it was accessible to normal people and not hard to
Yes.
find. And
Yes.
so between that and what's that one show? Rebel Wisdom started
Yeah.
featuring all these guys too.
Yeah.
Yeah, is I think that it's almost like a kind of actual revolution hitting the
Yes.
masses or being
Yes.
available to the masses.
Yes. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. So much stuff happens when that takes place. It's almost like, you know what? I think that's why Jordan Peterson has, embarked on the endeavor of taking out the university, because you got to think about it. In our little timeline that we just made, it was the university that was coupled with the like kind of like left behind religious people, right, who were rebellious against their parents and their origin story
Right,
to
right.
become atheists, where Jordan Peterson kind of takes the university and he goes, it's actually the university that's been the problem the whole time. Anything you want to know, we could throw the university out and all, and the expense of it and the extortion of it, how it extorts people, and you can learn anything on YouTube.
Yeah, well, also Jonathan Haidt has a very similar thing going on as well. And not only can you learn anything on YouTube, but they also have alternative models of higher learning coming out, being available to people that are less
Right.
expensive, that are more incorporating of distributed cognition and collective
Right.
intelligence, et cetera, and so forth.
Yes.
Yep.
So when you're saying it's like an axial revolution, like it might be, because the whole framework by which we ascertain higher levels of knowing or higher levels of intelligence, and I don't mean that in terms of like facts, it's just like your ability to see what needs to be done in a particular situation and act in a powerful way. That's more of what I
Right.
mean. That accessibility is much more prevalent, and it turns out that it's free. Like, who
Right.
knew that just
Right.
by interacting with other people that you could make better decisions and improve the quality of life for you, your family, and your immediate surroundings. You know what I mean? Like, that's way more valuable than spending 40 grand at some university where somebody's going to tell you about how God is not, some, spaghetti monster in the sky,
Right.
because that's what
Flying
they were
spaghetti
doing.
monster. Yeah.
That's what they were doing.
Yeah.
You
Your
know,
imaginary friend, the sky daddy, flying spaghetti monster.
yeah, that's what universities were ultimately doing. Um, and then charging you like the cost of a house, you know what I'm saying, before you
Right.
even had a job.
Or
So,
more. Yeah. Yeah, that's
um,
right.
so I feel like, that was a great warning sign that, when that whole intellectual dark web kind of emerged, and it kind of got everybody to ask the question, do we really want this kind of origin story with evolution? You know, like, maybe let's rethink the stories that our fathers were telling us. And our fathers have said, in all of the mythology, all of the stories, all of even our modern mythology, like like you look at the Marvel universe, like it's the Infinity Stones and the Elders that created the world. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like anything, any kind of story.
The all spark.
Yeah, Transformers, the Allspark, right? Exactly. So they kind of got us to back up and be like reconsider, is this really the route you want to go? And when you watched Jordan Peterson debate Sam Harris, what you saw was something like a more clear articulation that, okay, fine, science is powerful. I'm a scientist. The 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 power of observation of patterns is a powerful thing, but what you might need to consider is that there are already pre-programmed a priori patterns in the fabric of your society and the fabric of your own psychology.
Right. Yep.
And so, you know, I think that that seems more right to me. It seems like a more stable assumption to base your actions on, that there are already patterns that which are in the very fabric of the groups that I participate in and in the buildings that I walk into and the, in my own body, than there are in, what I can observably test with that instrument that Bill Nye told me about when I was a kid. Like, um it seems like I'm very grateful that people like Jordan Peterson have come out, and because you got to think about it, they've been around for like since the 80s and 90s. They were
So
they were
yeah,
there.
they've been so yeah, I want to explore that concept because you okay, so Dawkins, Hitchens, they're around since the late 60s, the 70s, but their work never had a good excuse to come out into the fore, you see? And
Till
so
9/11.
then Jordan Peterson, they're around for quite a while. Their work never had an excuse to come out into the fore. So it's almost like you keep producing the content and then the some kind of cultural socioeconomic event will occur which will suddenly bring the eyes of relevance to what you've been doing.
Yeah.
But okay, so one thing when we were talking on the phone, one thing you pointed out that I don't think we've hit on hard yet here, I think you just kind of mentioned it with those implicit patterns by which we do sense making that we don't realize, is that after 9/11 and after the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and probably before this too, it it became absolutely academically untenable to question anything about evolution theory.
Right.
So because you might be grouped with the creationists or the intelligent design
Exactly.
people, and
Exactly.
then you are therefore culpable
Yeah.
of religion-based homicide. Like you become
Yes.
grouped in. So
Yeah.
it's almost like the theory itself, advancement of it got put on pause because people were afraid to question it.
Yeah.
And I think people questioning it are doing a really good job. Like Brett Weinstein is questioning evolution theory now, not like evolution is wrong, but from his standpoint, but the mechanisms by which it operates.
Yeah.
Like he thinks that we have a bunch of false assumptions built into what we think of things, and it manifests itself in the age at which we experiment with mice and how many things we overlook with that. I mean, there's lots of things like that tie in. Rupert Sheldrake is another one who questions some of the axioms. Not that they're against it, but that we need to keep revising it. And
Yeah.
Donald Hoffman coming out saying that perhaps consciousness is fundamental and matter is emergent from it rather than the other way around, which is typically presumed. That even in Sam Harris's, he even in the video that I watched of him today on Moral Landscapes, he presumed that consciousness emerges from the material world, which Donald Hoffman is postulating the opposite. Both of them coming from a evolutionary mindset. So, in
Right.
other words, right around 2003, 2006, right after 9/11, Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the well, Rupert Sheldrake was saying his thing back then, but the Brett Weinsteins and the what's the other guy I just mentioned,
Donald Hoffman.
Donald Hoffmans of the world, you could not question the mechanisms of how
Yes.
evolution worked
Right.
because there was such a stigma on it. You don't
Right.
question these things. Anyway, does that
So
trigger enough
it does because I want
to
to
bring
double
up your thoughts that you had mentioned on that before?
yeah, because I want to double click on that because I remember like in defense. So this is kind of in defense of maybe some of the evangelical the hypothetical evangelical wise people that were out there,
Right.
during this time that like, you know, this 9/11 event, these four horsemen, the way that they were approaching their whole initiative was as if they were, stampeding victorious all over these idiots who
Right.
thought
Right.
that God was real. And what that did was it was so forceful and so arrogant that I think it ultimately expended itself a lot or exhausted itself a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God, because it also closed the door so tightly on the quote religious voice, where it did become from a certain perspective, like my perspective, like when I was a late teenager and getting into my um college years, I would have thought that an evangelical Christian, I would have just presupposed that they were some kind of like, delusional person.
Absolute lowbrow remedial kind of person.
Yeah. Like they just didn't know any better. They didn't know any better. And
Well, probably are a lot that fit that though.
right, but it still closed the
Right.
door on the potential for someone like, um, someone who really was like a maybe as more of a stage 4, stage 5 self-proclaimed Christian to,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe provide some kind of frame breaking insight for me.
Yes. Yes.
And this whole cultural divide happened, and why it was allowed to happen was because the real philosophers had been that they were non-existent. Like modern
Right. Right.
philosophers were not like, for example, like William Lane Craig is a evangelical Christian, but he is also a philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I say to I look back at this now and I say to myself, like, where were the philosophers in all of this? Because all I saw was sophists on the side of Christians, evangelicals, and even worse, sophists on the side of the evolution slash atheist camp. It was like, where's the wise person? Where's the person who loves wisdom here in order to
Mm-hmm.
not allow the cataclysmic effects of that tectonic shift of 9/11 to make
Right.
such a moral cultural divide between probably two absolutely massive groups of capable, competent people. So I think that society in
Well, not
general,
just 9/11, but the reaction to it and how it was leveraged by
it,
the four horsemen.
well said, right? It was totally leveraged in a deeply dishonest and kind of reprehensible way, as far as I'm concerned, because none of them. And Sam Harris, by the way, is like a neurosurgeon or a neurologist. Like he's like very deep, like really well educated, and he's a philosopher. And it's like you didn't read Plato right. Like you didn't.
Yeah.
And you didn't read the Bible right either,
Yeah.
for that matter. And neither are
Yeah.
the Christians, but that's still okay. It's like